Hey, what's going on? We have a very special guest today, Peter Demos. He's the president and CEO of Demos Brands and Demo Family Kitchen, and is a successful restaurateur, having founded 6 different Demos restaurant locations and 14 entities, including 2 PDK Southern Kitchen and Pantry restaurants across Middle Tennessee. He returned to the hospitality industry after earning his law degree and is highly requested speaker on the topics of leading with courage and purpose. Peter, how are we doing today?
I'm great. How are you doing?
Great. We're really excited to have you on the podcast. Just what's a restaurateur?
That's what I've just always known. I'm 4th generation restaurant operator. No one's ever really asked me that question. And even when we were talking right before you started recording, you said, "Is that restaurant entrepreneur?" And I thought about it. I'm like, I bet you that's what that is. I've never really thought of it, but I've always, even on tax forms, your profession is just restaurateur. But mostly, so I'm going to assume that's where the word came from. But yeah, it's a restaurant owner, and I would say we own restaurants, but if you're in the restaurant business, they more or less own you. So it's a little different there.
Absolutely. So 4th generation, was this when you were a little kid? You were like, I'm going to go own a restaurant. I'm going to join the parents' dynasty. We're going to keep it in the family.
Well, it started out. So my father, so my grandfather came to this country, and my great grandfather had a separate restaurant than him. And when he came here, he started a restaurant with his brothers, and through a series of different events, it ended up just being him during World War II. So my father started working with him, and at 9 years old. And they kind of went back and forth, and then my grandfather died in the 50s, and my father went into the theater business. So he managed motion picture theaters, and then got back into the restaurant business with a Western Sizzlin Steakhouse franchise, and he brought that to Middle Tennessee. And so I worked in there. So I was 12 years old. And yeah, I kind of thought, times, I want to do this, I want to do that. Yeah, I want to be here. But, I also wanted to be a policeman, and I wanted to be I wanted to be everything. So it wasn't like, I guess I still kind of the same way. I just kind of want to do everything and be everybody. But but from that, at some point in time, though, I made a decision that I wanted to be a lawyer and didn't want to have anything to do with the restaurants. In fact, one of the things that I used to say is that I would never be in the restaurant business, and I would never be married. And I've been in the restaurant business, and I've been married for 22 years this year. But what started that idea, wanting to be a lawyer, was I never got to miss school. That was never a thing. That was never an option for me. You had to have physical symptoms of sickness to miss school. But this one time I was able to miss because my father thought it was important for me to come and see. He was a witness in a criminal case, and where someone had defrauded elderly people using restaurants. He was one of the restaurants. And so I got to go and watch this trial. And for me, it was just fascinating. I mean, I was looking at it and watching how the arguments worked, and I just fell in love with the idea and the concept of law. So I started reading about it, and then even like all throughout college, I worked in restaurants. In law school, I worked in restaurants, and then when I practiced law, I still worked part-time in restaurants. So I still never kind of left the restaurant business, but my intent was to be a lawyer, which I did become, and I still keep my license up to date. But that just wasn't my passion.
Yeah. So you go to law school, you get this law degree, and then what do you do? Do you go out?
I practiced law for a firm, and I was, and there are things I love about law. I love the research component of it. I love the argumentation of it. I liked making the argument. I liked depositions and talking with people. That was the stuff that I enjoyed. But I absolutely hate paperwork. And that's what lawyers do. They do a lot of paperwork. And so, but I was sitting at my desk, and I had, our office was an old historic home. And so I had the worst place of it, because I was the lowest guy on the totem pole, and the office next to me was the second lowest guy, and I was listening to a partner having a conversation with him. It wasn't a bad conversation. They were just discussing strategy, and I was just like, I don't want to have that conversation in 10, 15 years. Like I said, there was nothing bad about the conversation. It just kind of made me realize it's not what I wanted. So I called my dad and I said, hey, I want to go for a ride. And that was always an indication we needed to talk, because when we were in a car, neither one of us could escape. So if it was just one of those ways that we could talk civilly, was in the car. And so we got in the car and we drove for a while. And I just said, hey, how would you feel if I wanted to come back in the restaurant business? And what I didn't know was he was actually looking for someone to buy it. He was getting to the age where he physically couldn't do the job anymore, and he was trying to get someone to buy the business. And since I wasn't interested and my sister wasn't interested in running it, he was going to do it. Well, when I came back and told him that, he of course pulled everything back, and I took over the operations, and then later purchased it from him a few years after that. So that's kind of how I got back into the business there.
Oh, that's incredible. That always seems to happen, where people look down the path and they go, I don't want that.
Yeah.
I don't want that.
Well, yeah, my criminal law professor was the chief prosecutor in the My Lai cases in Vietnam. And one of the things he said, if you don't change your profession several times, he said you're probably going to end up being really unhappy. He's like, he used to advocate people change their profession. I don't know if I agree with that, because I know a lot of people who are happy who stayed in the same spot, but I'm not that kind of person. Like, I have to do things. That's why I write articles, I write books, that's why I do different other businesses outside of restaurants, but restaurants is just the main business, and it's the main one there. But I got to keep going. My brain doesn't shut off.
I think that's the best way to go about it, because it's tough, because we'll go down this one path and you see these people who have been in the same role for so many years, and it's just a big comfort, honestly. Yeah. Getting uncomfortable is really important, and that's something that you do really well. So with the
let's say really well, I'm just comfortable in making everybody else around me uncomfortable. How's that?
I love that. So Peter, tell us, so you get into the restaurant business, and now are you owning them? It's you and your dad doing it together? And then
no, like I said, so I ran the operations for a while. So I got back in the business in 1999. And then in 2001, I took over all the operations while he said he's semi-retired. He worked when he wanted to. He didn't work when he didn't. And, he was there more as a counselor and advisor than anything else. And so that was in 2001. In 2009, my sister and I bought the restaurant business from him. And so when we purchased it from him, now my sister's not in the business itself. She's just she's on our board.
Yeah.
But when we purchased it, and that's kind of where we went from there. So, but again, he turns 87 today. Today's his birthday. He turned 87 today. Yeah. And and he'll walk, he'll still go in to eat, and he'll walk around a little bit. And but most of what he does, now is eat, and then he kind of travels and does things on his own. And so he just kind of enjoys life without having to worry if the dishwasher showed up or not.
Yeah, that's definitely a good place to be. So when you took over in 2009, how many restaurants did you have, and then how many are you at today?
Well, so when I took over actually in 2001, we had two locations. And then built a third one, and it opened in December of 2001. And then we opened up another one in Hendersonville in 2005. And then from there, we had opened up a couple others that didn't make it. The crash in 2008 killed it. And so someone came along, offered to buy the building from us, and we were very happy to let that one go. It was really far away. It was something that we were just kind of trying to see if we would work. from a distance without us kind of being involved and trying to figure it out from there. But also in '05, I took over another concept called Toots, that was a franchisor company, and they franchised several of them around, and we ran that for a while. And then we sold that off, and then but in
Wait,
2000,
one
sure.
sec. With Toots, because I remember we were talking about it beforehand. Don't you have a story about when you went to Clearwater?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So my father had a business partner who lived in Clearwater, Florida, and the partner called him and said, "Hey, there's this restaurant out here that I think would go really good in Middle Tennessee, named Hooters." And it was this brand new restaurant that no one had heard of, et cetera. So my father went down, and he took me with him. He went on multiple trips, but he took me with him on one. I was probably 12 years old at the time. And we were there for like 3 days, when Hooters first opened at 11 all the way up to close. That's where he's trying to learn and gather information and do that stuff. I don't know if it was the best father decision he ever made, putting me around a bunch of girls that were Hooters was uniquely different then as well. And so, but anyway, he came back and he started the concept. It was actually called Tutors. And then was sued by Hooters, and they had changed the name to Toots. And so, and then in, like I said, 2005, I took over the franchising company, as well as one of the corporate stores. And then and then from there, we sold it all off in 2006.
Gotcha. So then, where are you at today, and what
So
allows?
So yeah, I'd opened up even another restaurant called Peter D's, and it was going to be an upscale casual restaurant. And we, matter of fact, the book I've written called Afraid to Trust, what Afraid to Trust deals with, it deals with my journey toward faith, and what happened, how I came from hating Christians to becoming one. But then it dealt with Peter D's, because Peter D's was a miserable failure from beginning to end. It lasted for about 5 years, which it was God's grace that only allowed it to last that long. And through his faithfulness, someone came along and leased the building from us. So we actually now are leasing that building. So we still own the real estate on it, and go from there. But the book is also about like how to learn to apply the Bible through practical ways when you're dealing with failure, and learning how to no longer kind of be afraid during those times. Because that's the thing, when you're an entrepreneur, you fail a lot. Most entrepreneurs I know, they're going to fail. You can look at like Donald Trump had to file bankruptcy. I mean, that's probably one of the most well-known entrepreneurs out there. We fail because we try things, and we all have kind of a coach's mentality of I can do it all. And the reality is we can't. And then, when we get punched and knocked down, we think, oh, well, this is terrible. We're awful. And then we're like, oh, look, I could do that one. And then we run ahead and try to do something else. And so, I mean, that's kind of what we do. And so we did Peter D's, but what was cool about Peter D's was as we tried to expand it, and as we tried to expand Demos's, everything kept not working. Like, it was like, we would have a contract, and then all of a sudden they'd be like, nope, you're not going to do it. And I was talking to a friend of mine, and he said, you need to ask God what's going on. He said, take some time, go away. So I did. I went.
And this is in the middle of your failing.
Oh,
your restaurant opened up is just a demise in your presence.
It was weird stuff. I mean, it was just odd, weird stuff that just would normally never happen. It just something just odd kept stepping in the path.
Yeah.
And so we, we were negotiating a lease for a place, for example, and then all of a sudden they disappeared. Like, we couldn't call us back. And then next thing I know, there's a for lease, and we still can't get them to call back. The place is still for lease. It's been for lease for 3 years. We were very interested, but I mean, it was things like that. Like, I couldn't get them to do anything. It just like I said, they just disappeared on us. So I went to, so I drove about 3 hours away up into the mountains in East Tennessee, and just stayed there for a few days, and just prayed. And from there, I got the idea and the concept of PDK, Southern Kitchen and Pantry. And it was basically a fast casual. So where most restaurants that were operated was full service. You go, you order your food, you get your food, then you pay at the end of the meal. Fast casual is you go to a counter, you pay, and then we bring the meal to you. And so we decided we were gonna start that, and we were able to use recipes from Peter D's that we're able to kind of pull over into it. And so unlike most fast casuals that focus on one item like burgers or burritos, we have an eclectic menu. We have Southern menu. So we'll have shrimp and grits. We have salmon. We have, it's fresh cut there. You get to watch us cut it. There's salads. There's chicken tenders. There's chicken and waffles. So we have all these different burgers. We have all these different food items. And our check average is between 6 and 8 minutes to get out.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so we're very good at time and efficiency. And so we decided to apply it there. So we have 2 of those now. We have a third one that's under construction as well, also in the Middle Tennessee area. And so, but the other piece of it is it's also a gift shop that's attached to it as well. So we have different odds and ends. So you know, it's things that I personally would never buy, but my wife loves the stuff that we would. So it's like a tea towel or candles or bath bomb, you know, it's stuff that nature. But a lot of the items we have go to support local nonprofits. So like we have like dog biscuits that are made by a woman that has Downs, and a lot of the proceeds go to support Down Society. We support Thistle Farms as one of our biggest sellers that goes to help stop sex trafficking. And so we try to partner with those, not all the items, but we try to partner with a lot of items that go and help other people in the community as well.
So it's purpose-driven restauranting when most people aren't doing that.
Yeah, well, you know, and that's the thing too. There's 2 types of purpose-driven. There's purpose-driven that where the purpose is the result, and in this particular situation, that's a big part of it. You know, with our gifts, we do that. We will Martin Luther King Day, for example. You know, we collected donations and we gave a certain percentage ourselves to the King Center in Atlanta. You know, so whatever we will do things with that with the result. But for me, purpose, it goes beyond the result. That's usually a mission. That's usually the end result. A purpose is the motivating force that drives you. Like, why do you do what we do? And so, whereas before I was a Christian, we just did it because it was good business. We were doing it because we you know, I mean, that was what we did.
Yeah.
And then when I became a Christian, the day that I became one, I said, you know, God, you win. I turn everything over to you. And that was kind of how I ended up doing that. Well, that meant I had to turn my business over to him. So
and this was after the 3 days? This was after your
no,
3 days?
This was even a few years before that. This
Oh,
was
wow. Okay.
I had a big wrestling match with God. And actually, interesting enough, that was about 3 days too. I slept 4 hours in those 3-day period.
Oh my God.
Fighting, not wanting to be a Christian, but wanting to be one, not knowing what it was like. I mean, it was, you know, what do I have to do? What boxes do I have to check off to become? I mean, it was weird. It was but it was a great, amazing experience. And when I did that, and I said, God, I'm turning the whole business over to you. Then it was like, okay, again, how? So part of it was we created a purpose statement. And our purpose statement is we're to glorify God by serving others, which is to serve and care for our customers and serve and care for our employees. And then later we added some values to it, and later we added a vision to it. So we have a purpose of where we're going, which is our vision statement, and we have a purpose of why we do it, which is our purpose statement. And that's where we're trying to reach and achieve from there.
Wow. And you were just by yourself for those 3 days?
So I was the past president of the Tennessee Hospitality Association. And
okay.
I had gone to my wife had forced me to go to church to listen to a man named Angus Buchan to speak. And Angus Buchan is a South African evangelist. There's a movie about him called Faith Like Potatoes. And Angus did an altar call, and I went up at that time, but that bothered me. I didn't like it. I'm like, I felt like I was being conned, and like something is wrong. And then through a series of events, I ended up with a meet and greet in front of him. And he asked the question, he said, if you're willing to die for your country, why are you afraid to speak out for God? And no one's ever accused me of being afraid before. That was something that I've always been a fighter. And so I had to leave there and go to Memphis for a board meeting. And so I drove to Memphis for this 3-day board meeting for the Hospitality Association. So when I wasn't in a meeting, I was back in my hotel room. Like, I mean, I ordered room service. I couldn't even go out. Like any of the social events, I'm like, I can't, because I'm too busy trying to figure out what's going on in my life. And so, yeah, it was over that period of time is when I finally My wife said it was really weird. She said, I kept getting all these text messages from you. She said it was really weird. She said, I didn't understand what was going on. I don't even remember doing it.
You're sending her all your thoughts. You're like, I think this might be for me. And she's like, what is for me?
Yeah. Well, no, it'd be like, I was like really loving to her, and, it just like, just telling her how much she means to me and all this other stuff. And then she's like, okay, something's really wrong. Like she thought something was wrong. And then when I came home and told her that I wanted to get baptized, she was like completely shocked.
Yeah.
That's kind of where that went from there.
Yeah. But I mean, I want to bring up the point that it's super impactful that one person's comment can change someone's life, and it can really resonate with people. So you have to be very careful about what you say about different people, because that can be used for negative or positive. So
that's yeah. And I'm a big believer in questions. I think questions mean more than statements, because I can ask a question and make you come up with the answer, make you come up with your own why, your own purpose based off of those questions. And so when he asked that question, I was like, wait a second, why is that? Why am I afraid? Because then he not only did he accused me of being afraid without accusing me of being afraid. There was no accusation. Yeah. It was a question,
Cool.
And I was like, wait a second, logically, he's right. But no, wait a second, he can't be, because I'm not afraid, and I mean, it was kind of going back and forth. And so at the end, that was a big part of what I wanted to, and that's how I look at things. I ask questions. So for example, whenever I'm afraid of something now, and I recognize that fear, I'm afraid I'm gonna lose my business, or I'm afraid, my son's about to go off for college, I'm kind of, a little worried about that. And, I write down on a note card or a piece of paper, and I'll write, I'm afraid of whatever it is. I'm afraid I might lose my business. And then I go back and I change it. I ask the question, God, why don't I trust you to take care of my business? And so I change the question so that I have to kind of deal with it and answer that question. And when I can start answering questions, is when I can start being honest. And when you're honest with yourself and you're honest with him, that's when you could start really seeing true transformation and change and everything. But it starts with honesty. We're all so consumed with Facebook, Instagram, Twitter on how I look and how I am. We don't want to talk about the failures we had. We don't want to talk about, look, here's this great picture of my wife and 2 kids dressed up as, or we're going on a beach trip and all this other stuff. But we don't want to talk about the fact that we don't talk the whole time while we're on that trip, And so you got to be honest. And when you're honest about it is when true healing and restoration can begin.
Peter, that is incredible. The thing I really enjoyed was the vulnerability aspect, and then the questions, because you're 100% right. We don't focus on vulnerability at all. Everyone wants to be so stoic, and they want to be like, I'm invincible, I have no issues, I have no problems. All right, then you're sitting at home and you're depressed and you're struggling and you're wondering why, because you don't ask for help. And I like that you come to the point of, I can ask God for help, or I can ask myself for help, or if I change the question, because it's really interesting when you talk about that, because it's like, hey, you wake up in the morning, oh, I have to do this, this sucks. Or like, why do I have to work today? Or it can be like, wow, how can I make this day the best day ever? And that, your brain's going to start running. Okay.
Right.
When you're working, why don't you go on a walk, get some fresh air, or why don't you work from the pool, or why don't you do this, or why don't you roll? Like, there's just slight variations of doing the things, and you're much happier.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. And just by looking at, and you made a really good point, because by looking at the future tense, if you notice in language, whenever, especially when there's an argument, when people are arguing or discussing something and they're using past tense, it usually involves blame. If it's present tense, it usually involves an issue of morality and, should or right or wrong. Future tense involves, trying to find a solution. So a lot of times when you're engaged in that argument, you shift the question from a past tense of why did you do that to the future tense of how can we fix that? Going forward, what will we do? And when you change that, all of a sudden the argument can de-escalate. And I'm a big believer in arguments. I'm Greek. We fight and yell and scream. I mean, I'm a big believer in arguments, and I think it's important, and I think it's critical for any relationship, whether it's father-child, husband-wife, boss-employee. I think it's important to have arguments and disagreements. But I think, but don't get consumed with the why things happen. Have an argument about how you're going to solve it. And by shifting that, and sometimes when you just shift that question, the argument just immediately just kind of like goes away as you start kind of trying to figure out how to solve the problem. And you may not come to an answer, but boy, it does make it a lot easier, because now all of a sudden you're working toward a common goal as opposed to fighting each other over the problem, the reason why it happened.
Yeah, that is so powerful. I just sat there and was just taking it all in, because it's true. When you go, oh, you did that. All right, what am I going to do back? Like, tell you what you did wrong? Like, that doesn't make anyone feel good. How can we be better for next time? All right, we realized that there was a mistake. What are we going to do to improve? That's incredible. I want to transition real quick to, with COVID and everything going on there, you have multiple restaurants. How did you handle that situation? The dynamics, the chaos, this, you're allowed to wear a mask here, you can't wear a mask here, this is it. This is so many lines to teeter on.
What's funny, what's funny is that also when you're in a position of being in charge, you do have to project confidence that's going on. But at the same time, again, like I said, I don't mind being vulnerable. So there were times where we had meetings where I broke down crying to my team, and because it just was overwhelming. There was too much speed that it came, the force of which it came, the speed at which it came was what was so off. So where I, survived, the crash in 08, 09, back before that, 04, before that, after September 11th, when we dealt with all those issues, we got to see it was a slow roll coming. And I thought the same thing was going to happen here. I saw what was happening in China. It came to the United States in little bitty doses. And I even remember writing in my journal, we're going to have to deal with it. We had a general managers meeting on a Thursday. And I said, okay, told them, I said, guys, this is what's going to happen. I said, there's a possibility we might have to close for a week or two, and I said, but I don't know. I said, so just kind of be prepared. We're going to kind of deal with it in that area. And once we did that, and then that was on a Thursday. On Saturday, I contacted my IT guy and said, I think we're going to not have any dine-in like soon. Get some curbside, figure out how to get curbside going and trying to kind of do that there. And then on Saturdays, when they announced that, the Major League Soccer was killed, the NCAA tournaments was done, all this other stuff that was going away. And I remember writing in my journal, hang on, it's about to be a bumpy ride. And then I didn't realize the speed. So by Tuesday, I was actually calling a bankruptcy attorney saying, okay, look, I think I'm going to be okay, but just in case, I don't want to screw up. I want to learn on the front end of it. If I had to file bankruptcy, what's the best way to do it? So I mean, literally, we go from Thursday, where I say maybe in a couple of months, to less than a week later, I'm calling a bankruptcy attorney. It happened that quick. And, and I had, checks we paid on, at that time, we paid on 30-day net. And I had, we had checks that were due when we had 100% of sales that were trying to be paid with cash of 40-50% sales. And I mean, I had my current liability shortfall was almost $500,000. Yeah. And so it was like, okay, so what do I do here? So I'm trying to kind of work that out. But again, God set up little plans along the way. We had our IT guy, came from our point of sale system. He used to work for me as a manager. He came back. He did an amazing job throughout this process. An area supervisor had a delivery business before he came to work for us. So he was able to help institute delivery and curbside and kind of teach people how to do that. So we just kind of started seeing these little things that took place. And at the end of the day, all we did was just do one step at a time and just be thankful for everything we had. So whenever those fears come and take over and you start you're getting overwhelmed and like, what do I do? How do I handle it? We have two rules that we have when you get overwhelmed. In the restaurant, we used to have tickets. Now it's all electronic, but it used to be tickets. And all the tickets would wrap the wheels and they were all on the wall. And we would say, you can only do one ticket at a time. And that's it. We just stop one ticket at a time. We pull that one ticket, we work it, then we work the next ticket. We just do one ticket at a time until we got through it. And that's kind of that process. But the second piece was the emotional side of it. And, you know, it's again of, is everything going to fail? You know, what am I going to do? I just bought a new home, you know, I mean, whatever, you know, all that stuff that's happening. And, you know, am I going to be able to pay my kids' college that I had planned on? You know, everything you planned just was realized that all that may be useless. And so when that happens, again, I sit down, I take a sheet of paper and I write down everything that's positive that happens and things that I'm thankful for. And then I just pray to God and I just thank him for each of those things. And sometimes you can't come up with anything. I mean, sometimes you're just so overwhelmed and consumed. So for me, there's an easy starting point, which is I'm thankful I live in a community that has grocery stores everywhere. I mean, there's places all over the world that don't have grocery stores. I can easily access grocery stores, multiple grocery stores. In that grocery store, they have aisles dedicated to cookies. I mean, you know, I mean, you could be thankful for something like that. And as you start kind of doing it, you get a momentum of thankfulness. And as the Bible tells us, it says, when you start being thankful, there will be a peace that will come that's beyond recognition. And it's true. When I start thanking him for it and realizing, you start realizing, you know, I can't control COVID, you know, so it doesn't matter. I'm just going to do the best that I possibly can do. But where I end up is where he wants me to be. It may not be where I thought I was going to be, may not be where I want to be, but it's where he wants me to be. And that's where he's going to have me in the best possible position for him. And once you start kind of acknowledging that and recognizing that it's not about me, it's not about my comfort, it's not about my lifestyle, then all of a sudden you start kind of being like, okay, that's cool. I'm just going to keep moving forward and see what happens. I can't thwart his plans. I can't outsmart him. If he wants my restaurant to close, I can't do anything about it. If, you know, if no amount of government money can stop him from closing the restaurant. On the flip side of it, if he wants it open, he's going to allow it to be open. He may not need me to do it. He may have somebody else do it. So if I decide to sit back in my lazy chair and say, I'm not going to do anything, he'll be like, that's fine. You're not, but I still want the restaurant to open. So I'm going to have this guy run it. You know, I mean, he can do whatever he wants to do with it. And that's the part that's amazing. So for me, it's just a partnership. You know, when I work with him on it, it is like, it's like if I saw a piece of wood, you know, did the saw the wood or did I saw the wood? It's really both did it, you know, and so that's kind of the way that works, is a partnership on it. I'm just the tool on the saw that he's using. So it's not like he's doing it all without me controlling it, and nor at the same time the other way around. So it just, and that's kind of how it works, and that's how we got through it. But there's a lot of crazy people out there. You know, I've known it. I've been in the restaurant business forever. But when you start seeing it, when there is an overabundance of fear. I mean, I had someone call the police on me because I shook their hand for assault. Seriously, the police came and investigated, and they were laughing by the time, particularly when I'm like, I'll show you the video, and they're like, no, we don't need to see the video. Like, I mean, and then on the same week, I had the head of a parole board come and chew me out because I was following the law of making my employees wear masks. You know, and now that things are coming out, I got, you know, 2 of my locations, the customers don't have to wear masks, the employees do. And then, you know, and then other locations, I'm sorry, 3 of my locations, that's the case. And then other locations, they do have to wear masks. And so trying to kind of create policies and changes and do that stuff and communicate it, and just that becomes difficult. So when that happens, it's just one ticket at a time and see where we go from there.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely difficult with juggling so many different restaurants and different dynamics. So in your book, Afraid to Trust, when did you write that? And then what was really the purpose of it? And
yeah. So I wrote it a few years back, probably about 2 years ago. And the purpose of it was I would speak to some business groups, not very much, but I would do it from time to time. I've always enjoyed speaking in front of groups. I'm not you put me in a social event where I got to talk to somebody one-on-one. I'm like the guy in the corner that everyone's looking at him like, why is he staring at me? I just become extremely shy. But you put me in front of 1,000 people and I'm like, that's my element. Like, I'm okay with that. But it wasn't very much. And then people started inviting me to speak and give my testimony. And then I would start doing that. And then every time afterward, people come up and say, hey, you need to tell that story. You need to do this. And so finally, I thought, okay, I'm going to get it in writing. And it took a while for me to write it. I hired a ghostwriter. I'm a better speaker than writer. So I hired a ghostwriter to help. So I kind of type out my thoughts or talk to them, and then they type it out. And we go back and forth, and chapter 1's done. And, we kind of keep going through that process. And so, but then we had to kind of progress it from there. And, it was very personal. My wife has a chapter in the book, kind of talking about her, the issues that she had when I became a Christian, and she's a lifelong Christian. But all of a sudden she moved from first in my life to second. And so that was hard for her. And so she had to kind of learn how to do that. And she was the spiritual leader of the household. And then all of a sudden I became the spiritual leader of the household, and that was hard. And so we had to kind of learn that piece. So the purpose of it really was to kind of give people hope and encouragement, and let them, through a narrative format, learn a practical way of doing things. Now I'm in the process of writing my second book, which I got about a chapter and a half left. I've got one last draft on the next to last chapter, and then one more chapter after that, and then it'll go off to an editor, et cetera. And that book is on Christian civil disobedience. And so what I'm trying to do there is to say, okay, as we saw through 2020, and we saw a lot of the attacks on church and a lot of attacks on Christian businesses, how are we supposed to respond? We're not supposed to respond in violence and protests. We're not supposed to respond the way that they did on January the 6th, or the way they did in Minnesota. We're not supposed to respond in those type of fashions, because we're still supposed to be ambassadors to Christ. But we still cannot follow an unjust law. And so we have to find that balance. And so that's what I'm trying to write, is as a tool to kind of help people understand what to do, so that we can be prepared and be intentional going forward.
Wow. It's powerful stuff.
So I told you, like I said, my brain goes all the time.
All different directions. Well, Peter, I really appreciated you coming on today. It's definitely been awesome. And Peter?
How are you now? Is it better?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Good. You're still kind of frozen, your faces, so I'm not sure.
Can you see me now?
I can, but can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me? Peter?
Is that better?
Peter, you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, but you're not moving. But either way, so what I was going to get at was that, because I think you're good, kind of. But I was going to end it there anyway.
Okay.
So
see, it just knew.
Yeah. So it's literally all good. I'm just going to chop off that end portion.
Okay.
Because I ended it with, hey, Peter, that was awesome. And then I'd probably just say, hey, Peter, where can we reach you at? Actually, here, I know what to do.